Hey, quiet warriors. Pause for a second. I want you to really hear this. Not everyone who dislikes you is evil. Not everyone who resents you is consciously trying to hurt you. And not everyone who hates you actually hates you. Most of the time, the hatred you receive has very little to do with who you are, and everything to do with who they are afraid they've become. And that truth can either break you, or free you. Because the moment you understand why people hate you, you stop shrinking. You stop explaining yourself. You stop bending your spine to make other people comfortable. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Not because you are wrong, but because they are struggling." Today, I want to talk to you about 6 reasons people hate you. 6 reasons that feel personal, but aren't your fault. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand something most people never do. Their hatred is not a signal to change who you are. It's a signal that you're standing in your truth. This is Stoic quiet strength. And this is not about fighting back. It's about standing still while the storm reveals itself. Let's begin. The first reason people hate you is because you remind them of what they are not. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to boast. You don't have to prove yourself. Your presence alone does it. You walk into a room with calm confidence. You speak without desperation. You move without chaos. You seem at peace. And for someone who feels lost, that is unbearable. They look at you and see confidence they wish they had. Discipline they never built. Peace they never protected. Courage they abandoned. And suddenly, without you saying a word, a mirror appears. Not a flattering mirror. A brutal one. A mirror that reflects their procrastination. Their excuses. Their wasted time. Their unkept promises to themselves. And instead of facing that reflection honestly, they turn the discomfort into resentment. Seneca understood this perfectly when he said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." Your life becomes that frightening imagination. You represent a version of themselves they failed to become. And here's the part most people don't understand. They don't hate your success. They hate the gap between who they are and who they wanted to be. So they call you arrogant for being confident. They call you lucky to excuse their inaction. They downplay your achievements to protect their ego. Because if your growth is real, then their stagnation is undeniable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And when their thoughts are filled with regret, comparison, and self-blame, your presence feels like an accusation, even when it isn't. So they criticize you. They mock you. They try to humble you. Not to correct you, but to silence the reminder. And here's where Stoicism saves you. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. You are not responsible for their reflection. You are not obligated to dim your light to protect their comfort. You are not cruel for living well. You didn't cause their disappointment. You only revealed it." And the Stoic response is not to argue. Not to defend. Not to explain your journey. It is to remain unchanged. To understand that their hatred is not an attack on your character, but a confession of their pain. And when you truly understand this, something powerful happens. You stop internalizing the looks, the whispers, the subtle digs, the passive aggression. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" And you start asking, What truth did my presence expose? This is why Stoics move quietly. Why they don't seek validation. Why they don't chase applause. Because they know that living well will disturb those who refuse to. Seneca said, "It is the sign of a great mind to be content with little. And contentment is threatening to those who live in constant lack. So if people resent you for being calm, for being disciplined, for being focused, for being at peace, understand this. You are not offending them. You are confronting them, without saying a word. And this is only the first reason. Because sometimes, it goes deeper than comparison. Sometimes, you don't just remind them of what they're not. Sometimes, you trigger wounds they've spent their entire lives trying to ignore. And that's where the second reason begins. Sometimes it's not that they compare themselves to you. Sometimes the reason is that you touch a wound they never healed. You didn't create the insecurity. You didn't invent the fear. You didn't place the doubt inside them. You just pressed on it by existing as yourself. You speak with clarity, and it reminds them how confused they feel. You carry yourself with self-respect, and it exposes how often they betray their own boundaries. You stay consistent, and it highlights how often they quit on themselves. And suddenly, something inside them flares up. Not anger at first. Discomfort. A tightness in the chest. A quiet voice whispering, "You're not enough." And instead of listening to that voice, instead of sitting with it, instead of doing the painful inner work, they project it onto you. This is how insecurity turns into hostility. Epictetus warned about this centuries ago when he said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." You are not disturbing them. Their judgment about themselves is. Your confidence doesn't insult them. It exposes how little confidence they have. Your discipline doesn't shame them. It reminds them of the promises they broke to themselves. Your peace doesn't attack them. It confronts the chaos they refuse to address. And here's the cruel irony. The more calm you are, the more aggressive they become. Because calm offers no distraction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your existence becomes the obstacle they refuse to walk through. So they criticize your tone. They misinterpret your silence as arrogance. They accuse you of thinking you're better than everyone else. Not because you said you were, but because standing next to you forces them to feel how badly they don't feel about themselves." Think about this carefully. Have you ever noticed how some people only feel comfortable around you when you're struggling? When you're uncertain? When you're apologetic? When you're shrinking? But the moment you grow steadier, the moment you stop oversharing, the moment you stop seeking approval, their energy shifts. They become distant, cold, critical. That's not coincidence. That's insecurity losing its advantage. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. For he is not permitted to prove himself." When you've faced yourself honestly, your fears, your flaws, your limits, and come out stronger, you become living proof that change is possible. And for someone who has avoided self-confrontation their entire life, that proof is unbearable. So they turn it into blame. They say, "You make people uncomfortable. You're too serious. You've changed. No. You've healed." And they haven't. Stoicism teaches us something critical here. You are not obligated to make yourself smaller to soothe another person's unhealed wounds. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Your job is not to manage their feelings. Your job is to live in alignment with your values. And when your alignment triggers someone else's insecurity, that is information, not guilt. Here's where most people go wrong. They sense the tension. And they start editing themselves. They laugh less. They speak softer. They hide their wins. They dull their edges. They think, if I just make myself more acceptable, the hostility will stop. But it never does. Because the problem was never you. The problem was the wound. And no amount of self-betrayal on your part will heal someone else's insecurity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily. I can choose not to be harmed. And I won't feel harmed. I can choose not to feel angry, and I won't feel angry. This is the power Stoicism gives you. You stop reacting emotionally to emotional people. You stop absorbing what doesn't belong to you. You stop apologizing for the discomfort your growth creates. You understand that some people don't hate you. They hate how you make them feel about themselves. And that brings us to the third reason. Because sometimes insecurity isn't the root. Sometimes it's something darker. Quieter. More corrosive. Sometimes the reason they hate you is because you have something they want. And they want it badly. Let's talk about something most people are afraid to admit. Not all hatred comes from pain. Some of it comes from desire. You have something they want. And they don't just admire it. They resent you for having it. It could be your lifestyle. Your freedom. Your relationship. Your confidence. Your opportunities. Your discipline. Your peace. Something about your life feels out of reach to them. And instead of asking, what can I learn from this? They ask, why does this person get it? And not me? That question is where jealousy is born. But jealousy rarely shows up honestly. It doesn't say, I wish I had what you have. It disguises itself as criticism. As sarcasm. As dismissal. As fake concern. They say things like, it won't last. You got lucky. Anyone could do that. I don't even want that kind of life. But their attention never leaves you. They watch your moves. They track your progress. They study your growth. Not to celebrate it. To measure what they lack. Seneca spoke directly to this when he said, we are more disturbed by what we want than by what we fear. Their desire becomes a constant irritation. Because wanting requires effort. And effort exposes how unwilling they've been. Your success becomes proof that the path exists. And if the path exists, then their excuses collapse. Marcus Aurelius wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. You chose action over comfort. Discipline over distraction. Patience over impulse. They chose ease. They chose delay. They chose someday. And now, your results stand between them and the lie they've been telling themselves. So they turn desire into hostility. They downplay your work to protect their pride. They search for flaws to justify their envy. They hope you fail, not because they're evil, but because your failure would restore their peace. Think about that. Your success threatens the story they tell themselves to sleep at night. The story that says, I could have done it too, if I wanted to. If circumstances were different. If people supported me. If life was fair. But when you succeed with the same limitations, the same fears, the same doubts, that story dies. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. When you first started, they laughed. They doubted you. They dismissed your efforts. Now they're quiet, watchful, uncomfortable. Because the joke stopped being funny when it worked. And here's the Stoic lesson you must hold on to. Jealousy is not your responsibility. You don't owe anyone mediocrity to make them feel equal. You don't owe anyone failure to preserve their self-esteem. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why your life is improving. Seneca said, "He who envies others does not obtain peace of mind. Their unrest is internal. And the more you chase their approval, the more power you give their envy." Stoicism teaches something radical here. You don't respond. You don't flex. You don't hide. You remain steady. You let your actions speak, quietly, consistently, without defense. Because the moment you seek validation from jealous people, you hand them control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." You cannot live that way. Your worth cannot be negotiated by people who resent your growth. And sometimes, the jealousy turns into something even more aggressive. Because when they can't have what you have, and they can't make you feel small about it, they try something else. They try to control you. And that leads us to the fourth reason. Some people don't hate you because of who you are. They hate you because they can no longer use you. Because at some point, quietly, firmly, you stopped being controllable. You started saying no without explaining yourself. You stopped asking for permission to live your life. You began trusting your own judgment instead of outsourcing it to everyone else. And that terrified them. Because control only works on people who doubt themselves. The moment you develop inner authority, the power dynamic collapses. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than most. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you realize this, you become dangerous to people who thrive on influence, guilt, and manipulation. You stop responding instantly. You stop justifying your choices. You stop being emotionally available on demand. And suddenly, you're labeled difficult. Not because you are unreasonable, but because you are no longer obedient. They don't say, "I'm losing control over you." They say, "You've changed." They don't say, "I'm uncomfortable with your independence." They say, "You're selfish." They don't say, "I can't manipulate you anymore." They say, "You think you're better than everyone." This is how control disguises itself, as concern. Epictetus warned us clearly when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The moment you master yourself, you remove yourself from their reach. And here's what most people don't see coming. When control fails, resentment replaces it. Because control gave them certainty, predictability, access. And now, they don't know how to reach you anymore. So they test you. They push boundaries to see if you'll fold. They guilt-trip you to see if you'll explain. They provoke you to see if they can still get a reaction. And when you don't react, when you remain calm, when you stay firm, when you don't engage emotionally, their frustration turns into hate. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." Your boundaries are a declaration of freedom. And freedom threatens people who rely on dominance to feel safe. Understand this clearly. Not everyone wants you empowered. Some people benefit from your confusion. Some people benefit from your self-doubt. Some people benefit from you needing them. And when you remove that need, you become uncontrollable. Stoicism teaches you not to rebel loudly, but to withdraw silently. You don't argue with manipulators. You don't debate boundary violators. You don't negotiate your values. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Stand firm like a rocky promontory against which the restless waves continually break." You don't push back. You don't explain. You don't overreact. You just don't move. And that stillness enrages people who depend on emotional leverage. Because without your reaction, they have nothing to work with. So if people suddenly turn cold when you grow confident, if resistance appears when you stop complying, if hostility emerges when you choose yourself, understand this. You didn't become heartless. You became self-governed. And for some people, that's unforgivable. But there's an even deeper layer to hatred than control. Because sometimes, it's not about power over you in the present. Sometimes, you represent something they lost long ago. Something they'll never get back. And that's where the fifth reason begins. Some people don't hate you because of who you are today. They hate you because of who they used to believe they could become. When they look at you, they don't just see your present life. They see a version of themselves that never happened. A road not taken. A risk avoided. A dream postponed until it died quietly. And that kind of pain doesn't shout. It simmers. You pursued something they once talked about endlessly. You took a leap they stood at the edge of for years. You tolerated fear, uncertainty, and discomfort, while they chose safety. And now, you are living evidence that it was possible. That's what hurts. Seneca captured this bitterness when he said, "Every guilty person is his own hangman." They punish themselves internally every time they see you move forward. Your life forces them to remember who they were before compromise set in. Before responsibility became an excuse. Before fear disguised itself as wisdom. They remember the nights they promised themselves. One day, I'll do it. And one day, never came. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculation about others, unless it is with a view to some mutual benefit." But they waste their mental energy on you. Not because they admire you, but because you awaken regret. You didn't steal their dream. You didn't block their path. You didn't sabotage their potential. They abandoned it. And seeing you live boldly forces them to confront that truth. So they rewrite the story. They say, "I grew up. I chose the responsible path. That dream was unrealistic anyway." But when they see you building what they once wanted, those words collapse. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." You did both. They only did the first part. And now your existence reopens a wound they sealed with denial. This is why some people seem uncomfortable celebrating your growth. Why encouragement turns into silence. Why pride turns into distance. It's not because they don't care. It's because caring would require mourning their own lost potential. And that grief is heavier than resentment. Stoicism teaches you to understand this without arrogance. You don't look down on them. You don't gloat. You don't provoke. You simply continue. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Your discipline reminds them of wasted years. Your progress highlights delayed action. Your courage exposes the cost of comfort. And that realization is unbearable for people who have made peace with regret by pretending it never mattered. So they lash out. They minimize your achievements. They question your choices. They predict your failure. Not because they truly believe you'll fail, but because your success forces them to relive a life they never lived. And here's the Stoic truth you must carry with you. You are not responsible for someone else's unlived life. You don't owe anyone the abandonment of your dreams to ease their regret. You don't owe anyone stagnation to preserve their illusions. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." You did the hard work. They didn't. And that difference will always create friction. But we're not done yet. Because there is one final reason people hate you, and it's the most revealing of all. It has nothing to do with success. Nothing to do with control. Nothing to do with regret. It has everything to do with happiness. And how threatening it can be. Some people don't hate you because you're doing better than them. They hate you because you're happy without permission. Not performative happiness. Not loud happiness. Not forced smiles or constant celebration. Real happiness. Quiet contentment. Inner steadiness. And that is deeply unsettling to miserable people. Because misery needs agreement. Miserable people survive by believing that life is unfair, joy is temporary, and peace is an illusion. They need others to validate that belief. So when they see you calm in chaos, grateful without excess, content without constant achievement, their worldview cracks. Seneca warned us about this when he said, "A man who is unhappy before the event is unhappy twice." But miserable people don't want to hear that. They want confirmation that life is heavy, cruel, and hopeless, because that narrative excuses their bitterness. And then you show up. Unbothered. Grounded. Emotionally regulated. You're not chasing validation. You're not drowning in drama. You're not complaining endlessly. And suddenly, their misery feels optional. That's what threatens them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life, it is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Your happiness exposes a terrifying truth. Their suffering isn't entirely caused by circumstances. It's caused by interpretation. And instead of questioning their mindset, they question you. They say, "You're pretending. You're naive. Just wait, life will humble you." Because if happiness is real, and achievable, and sustainable, then their constant dissatisfaction becomes a choice. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." You learned that. They didn't. And here's what hurts them most. You didn't wait for life to be perfect to be at peace. You accepted imperfection. You released comparison. You stopped needing external approval to feel whole. And that breaks the unspoken rule of misery. We suffer together. But you stepped outside of that agreement. And people who are drowning often resent those who learn how to float. They don't want to be saved. They want company. So they criticize your optimism. They mock your calm. They provoke you to see if they can pull you back into emotional chaos. But Stoicism teaches you something powerful here. You don't owe your pain to anyone. Seneca said, "Happiness is not the absence of problems, but the ability to deal with them." You didn't escape struggle. You transcended it. And for some people, that's unacceptable. Because your happiness challenges the story they've built their identity around. The story that says, "This is just how life is. This is just how I am. There's nothing I can do. Your existence says otherwise." And that's why they hate you. Not because you're cruel. Not because you're arrogant. Not because you're wrong. but because you are living proof that peace is possible. Now listen to me carefully. When you understand all 6 reasons, something shifts inside you. You stop personalizing rejection. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop begging to be understood. Because you realize this truth. People don't hate you because you're failing. They hate you because you're free. Free from insecurity. Free from approval. Free from control. Free from regret. Free from shared misery. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And Stoicism isn't about fighting back. It's about refusing to be dragged down. So what do you do with this knowledge? You don't harden your heart. You don't isolate yourself from the world. You don't become bitter. You become immovable. You stay kind, but not naive. Calm, but not passive. Open, but not unguarded. You live well. Because living well is not just the best revenge. It's the highest form of strength. If this message spoke to something inside you, if you felt misunderstood, resented, or judged for simply being yourself, then you're not alone. This is Stoic quiet strength, power in silence. And if you want more lessons on inner discipline, emotional mastery, and silent power, stay here. Subscribe. Stay present. Walk quietly. And let your life speak for itself. Because the loudest confidence is peace.